Certainly appreciate your support in that. The meeting we had upstairs today was a great representative of a lot of different industries from Louisville. I think we actually touched every business sector. So it was certainly a very good discussion, and I'll leave it to Sarah to introduce the leader and talk about some of the discussion.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for hosting this discussion today. As Nick said, I'm Sarah DeVacia Wisdom, and I'm the President and CEO of Greater Louisville, Inc. And we had a discussion today where we talked about the strain that has been facing a lot of our businesses over the past year and a half. I don't think that strain is any surprise to anyone in this room. I've had calls from multiple businesses every day where stories are of businesses that are facing loss, stories of businesses that are pulling through, questions, and we've tried to answer those questions. But just as businesses are trying to get back to full capacity and are really excited about the capacity restrictions being lifted, they are faced with another challenge, and that is the workforce challenge. Workforce was a challenge before the pandemic began. It has been greatly exacerbated by the pandemic. What we are seeing is that childcare is one factor, and we know that this is a factor, this is a multifaceted problem, and it will require multifaceted solutions. So we know this, but childcare is one of the major factors impacting the return to work. We saw during the pandemic that about 8% of the child care centers closed throughout the state. We believe that Louisville was probably even harder hit by that, although that we don't have an exact number. So now as child care centers are trying to reopen, we're seeing that they're facing some of those same workforce challenges that our businesses are facing. Our community, our region, is greatly impacted by the pandemic because we rely on a multitude of industries to really drive our economy forward. And those were the same industries that were hardest hit by the pandemic. So we see the workforce challenge in the restaurants that we're trying to frequent who may be closed multiple days a week now. We see it in the longer time it takes to get through the grocery store with the reduced checkout lines. We see it in a lot of ways. We also see it in the supply chain disruption. So we're seeing this in a number of ways. We also believe that the federal pandemic unemployment insurance has created some of this as well. And while we're glad to have a return to work incentive, we would like to see people getting back to work and getting back to employment. So we are hopeful that we see some of these workforce challenges be solved as we get through September and see schools get back into session. But this is a major concern for our businesses. It's felt across all industry sectors, and that was a lot of the conversation that we held today. So now I'm going to introduce you to someone who probably doesn't need an introduction. So we appreciate the leader always being accessible to the business community and being willing to engage in this discussion today. So I'd like to introduce Leader McConnell.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Nick. What Sarah and Nick have said underscores what I'm hearing all over the state in meetings similar to this. The two biggest problems we have post-pandemic are workforce issues, getting people back to work, and there's no question that we'd be in better shape if the governor had made a decision to discontinue the federal bonus, as 25 other states have. And it's interesting to note that every state around us, except for Illinois, has discontinued the federal bonus. I was on a conference call with a particular group of companies, some in Kentucky and some in Indiana, and they reported that when the Indiana governor discontinued the extra $300 a week bonus, the next day they got 200 applications, job applications. So there's no question that is creating a big challenge for Kentucky businesses post-pandemic. Secondly, inflation is raging. And I want to give Larry Summers, who was Bill Clinton's Secretary of the Treasury and Barack Obama's chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, kudos for predicting this. He said in February, when the new rescue package was completed with not a single Republican vote in the House or Senate, that we were flooding the economy with such a significant amount of money that he predicted we'd have raging inflation, and that is in fact what we're grappling with today. Let me also address the status of the infrastructure discussions that I know you're interested in that's ongoing. First, let me say there is bipartisan support for a significant infrastructure package. There was during the Obama administration. There was during the previous administration. It's been challenging to figure out exactly how we can pay for it in a way that's comforting to both sides. As you know, we have a 50-50 Senate, a narrow Democratic majority in the House. The American people did not give either side a mandate, and so it's not surprising. It is challenging to work these things out. Having said that, even though it rarely, I'm not being critical of you guys, but it rarely makes news, we have passed 7 major bipartisan bills this year. We find that when we do that together, it doesn't make much news. So there are things that we can agree on. But we've had some big differences this year about what the country needs at this particular stage post-pandemic. And the first big disagreement was the American Rescue Package, another $2 trillion added to the national debt just a couple of months ago. And now we're confronted with an administration that would like to spend $5 trillion more on top of the $2 trillion. This $7 trillion would amount to roughly what we spent to win World War II, authorized in 1 year. We think that is wildly out of proportion to what the country needs. But a portion of it, is something the country clearly needs if we can figure a way to pay for it. And so you've watched these ongoing discussions. 10 of my members have been keeping me posted, and I've encouraged them to try to see if we could get an outcome. They've been working with 10 Democratic senators. As you saw last week, they went down to see the president, and there was no discussion of any linkage between infrastructure and the subsequent reconciliation package that the administration has in mind. In other words, they were discussed separately. The president walked out with the 20 bipartisan senators, announced they had an agreement, and a couple hours later said that if he got infrastructure without the second bill, he'd veto it. Then he walked that back. So let me just tell you where I think we are. I appreciate the president saying that he's willing to deal with infrastructure separately, but he doesn't control the Congress, and the Speaker and the Majority Leader of the Senate will determine the order. And so what I did this morning is to call on the president to ask the Majority Leader and the Speaker to deal with these issues separately, to deal with them separately. That's the way the deal was negotiated according to the 10 Republicans, I can assure you, who were in the discussion. There was no agreement that they would be linked. And so the president's promise to deal with it separately is nice, but isn't determinative unless the Majority Leader and the Speaker agree. With that, I'll be happy to take a few questions. Bruce?
Yeah, did the president do enough over the weekend to reassure Republican senators with his walk back on infrastructure? And do you support the bipartisan plan that was rolled out late last week?
Well, at the risk of repeating myself, I appreciate the president saying he's willing to deal with it separately, but he doesn't determine that. Having been the Majority Leader myself, I can tell you the Majority Leader in the Senate and the Speaker in the House determine the order of things. And so what I'm asking the president to do is to call on the Majority Leader and the Speaker to deal with these issues separately, because none of the Republicans during the negotiations and the Democrats that were in that group talked about it being linked to anything else. But the linkage, Bruce, can only be determined by the Speaker and the Majority Leader.
What can Congress do, or are they doing, to help with the child care situation that so many families face?
Well, I think the single biggest solution to that is kids getting back in school, which is going to happen this fall, and people going back to work and actually having income. And the child care providers, as we've heard, got hit with the same employment problem, getting people back willing to work in the child care centers that we have around the state. Has been the same challenge we've been talking about, getting people back to work. I think to the extent that the child care providers could get staffed up by things like the $300 a week federal bonus being discontinued would be extremely helpful.
I believe Sarah said that GLI was glad to see a back to work bonus that Governor Beshear had laid out. Do you think that's a good plan to get people
It
back?
sounds to me like that's more of the same. That's the inherent problem, being paid more to stay home. And so now he wants to pay people to go back. I wouldn't do it that way. I think the simplest way to do it, it's working in 25 other states, in Tennessee, Missouri, West Virginia, Indiana, Ohio. Discontinue the bonus, and I think you'll see significant numbers of people interested in going back to work.
So on Friday, an Indiana judge said that it was unconstitutional for them to throw out the whole benefits and that kind of thing, the $300. So what would you say to that? Because that could happen here in Kentucky if Beshear decided to reverse and follow Holcomb's lead.
Well, I don't know what an Indiana judge said. I know that the governors have the option. 25 of them have taken the opportunity to discontinue the $300 per week federal bonus, and it seems to be helping to get people back to work.
Have you seen details or at least a framework of the bipartisan infrastructure deal, and do you support that?
I haven't decided yet, but I've certainly encouraged our members to talk to the Democrats. We need to get a score, so we need to see whether the proposal is credibly paid for. But I think it's fair to say I'd like to see us get there. And I do think the only way we can get there is to de-link the two issues. They are really separate issues.
Do you think any plan will include the Brent Spence Bridge?
What about the Brent Bridge?
Will that be part of any infrastructure plan, do you believe?
I doubt if there'll be any earmarks, Lawrence. I seriously doubt that. But hopefully we'll figure a way to solve that problem. The biggest part of the problem has been in Frankfurt, not in Washington. And they have to decide, how to kick in the state part of that they would need to do probably under any scenario, even with a new significant infrastructure package.
Do you think tolling would have to be a condition on financing?
I don't know, but I don't know for sure, but I do know that's the way it was done here. That's the way it's going to be done down near Henderson. But it's been a huge challenge in northern Kentucky, and I understand why. They've got a lot of commuters.
The governor continues to say, I know you're calling on him to end the enhanced unemployment benefit. He continues to say that it's pouring money into the economy, strengthening some of these businesses like groceries and restaurants. And he goes back to the child care issue. What about his argument that this is needed until the economy is strong as he believes it needs to be?
I don't want to put Sarah on the spot, but I thought, Sarah, I just heard you say this is a problem.
It is a problem. It continues to be a problem because child care centers are having difficulty finding workforce. So that needs to be addressed. It's one of the things we're concerned about.
Actually, question for you, Sarah, and then also I'd love to hear from you, Senator, on this one. So part of the Biden agenda has at least include talk about free community college issues. Here, especially in Louisville, education has been a very important issue, even pre-pandemic, getting people who have the appropriate certifications to fill jobs, not just bodies, doing hard work. We need people with skills. So, Senator, how do you see that proposal for a free community college going forward?
I would not be in favor of the federal government providing free community college tuition. Look, we now have a debt the size of our economy. I don't know how many times I need to repeat this. We are playing Russian roulette with the American economy. Last year, we had a 100-year pandemic, understandable, an emergency. The pandemic is essentially in the rearview mirror. And to continue to borrow and spend at this level is completely unacceptable for the future of this country. Tuition is going up all over the country, and there are a lot of complex reasons that that's occurring. But I don't think the federal government can afford to borrow enough money to provide free tuition. Besides, what will the tuition be? I mean, if they just keep raising the amount of money, it seems to me it's an endless pit into which you would fall.
You blame Kentucky's labor shortage on the federal bonus, but what about in other states where that's been lifted and they're still having a hard time?
Oh, I'm not saying it solves all the problem. I don't think it solves all the problems, but if it solves, of the things that are available you can do immediately, it would surely be a huge help. You've heard these people say it. I've heard it in every community in Kentucky I've been in this year. Same problem, no matter what the size of the business. UPS and Toyota, big. You just heard UPS say problem even for them. Big companies that pay well still have the problem. And no, I'm not saying it's a panacea, but it would sure help.
So what's the next step then after that's gone? What's the next step then once that's gone?
For the economy to recover. We're going to have a hefty growth rate this year. Not surprisingly, everybody's re-engaging, and we're getting back to work. That's the way to have a healthy economy.
One more question.
Can I ask you about COVID-19? So COVID-19 cases, they're rising among unvaccinated Americans. We know a lot of those folks are white Republican males. What would you say to those people who are not taking the shot?
Take it. I'm a big fan of vaccines. As a few of you know, I was a polio victim when I was a kid. It took 70 years to develop a polio vaccine, 2 of them that worked. Our country, as a result of the CARES Act and the $50 billion we put into Operation Warp Speed, developed not 1, not 2, but 3 highly effective vaccines in less than a year. It was a modern medical miracle. That doesn't work if people don't get vaccinated. So for whatever influence I can have over those decisions, I want to encourage everyone to get the vaccine. Thank you.